All right, welcome back. Today, we're going to build a really powerful, reusable framework, something you can use to analyze and understand pretty much any business sector you come across. This isn't about memorizing facts for just one industry, it's about learning a method, a way of thinking, so you can see what truly makes any business tick. And you know what? It all starts with a very strange story about beer and diapers. So, there's this famous legend in the retail world. Apparently, a company was digging through its sales data and found this bizarre connection. On Friday nights, sales of beer and diapers would spike together. What was going on? Well, the theory was that parents getting ready for a weekend with the kids were stocking up on essentials, diapers for the baby, and a six-pack for themselves. Now, you might think, okay, that's a funny story, but what's the point? The point is, this perfectly illustrates the single most important rule of business analysis. The sales numbers, the profit and loss statements, that's just the tip of the iceberg. What really matters are the hidden drivers, the human behaviors happening just below the surface. To really analyze a sector, you have to find its unique version of beer and diapers. So, how do we do that? Well, we start with the big picture. This is the first part of our framework, looking at all the massive external forces that are shaping an entire industry. Think of these as the powerful ocean currents that every single company in that sector has to deal with, whether they like it or not. And you can basically break all of these external forces down into two big buckets. On one side, you've got your supply side factors. This is everything that impacts a company's ability to actually make its product. Things like raw materials, parts, labor, all that stuff. And on the other side, you have demand side factors. This is everything that affects a customer's desire and ability to buy that product. Let's use the auto industry as an example to make this really clear. Okay, on the supply side for a car company, just think about the price of materials. If steel or lithium prices suddenly shoot up, the car maker's profits get squeezed, right? Then you've got component availability. I mean, we all saw what happened with the semiconductor shortage a while back. A lack of one tiny chip can bring an entire assembly line to a grinding halt. And of course, there's labor. Worker strikes or shortages can throw a huge wrench in the works. All right, now let's flip over to the demand side. The biggest driver here is usually customer income. When the economy's doing well and people have more cash, they make big purchases, like cars. Another huge one is financing. Easy access to loans has this really interesting effect. It basically lets people buy a car today that they might have waited 3 years to buy otherwise. It pulls future sales into the present. And finally, you have regulations. A new government rule on emissions or safety can instantly change everything for the entire industry, almost overnight. Okay, so once we've got a handle on that big external world the company is operating in, it's time to zoom in. We need to look inside the companies themselves to measure how well they're actually navigating that environment. And to do that, we use what are called key performance indicators, or KPIs, to get a really clear picture of a company's internal health. For any business that has a physical location, a store, a warehouse, anything like that, one of the most powerful metrics you can look at is revenue per square foot. It's a super simple calculation. You just take the company's total revenue and divide it by the total space it occupies. This number tells you exactly how good that business is at using its physical space to make money. And this is why this metric is so incredibly powerful. I mean, obviously, a giant superstore is going to have way more total revenue than a tiny little boutique. But which one is more efficient? By looking at revenue per square foot, you can actually compare them on an equal footing. It just completely levels the playing field and shows you who's really good at what they do. Okay, so our next key metric is something called inventory turnover. This one is all about speed. It's a ratio that tells you how many times a company sells through and replaces its entire stock of stuff within a certain time frame, usually a year. It's a fantastic way to see how quickly products are flying off the shelves. Now, to calculate this, the best formula to use is cost of goods sold divided by average inventory. So why do we use cost instead of sales? Well, it's because sales revenue has the company's profit margin baked into it. If you use the actual cost of the goods, you strip that out, and you get a much purer, more apples-to-apples comparison of how fast the physical items are actually moving. So here's the most important thing to remember about this number. A high number isn't always good, and a low number isn't always bad. Think about it. A grocery store that sells bread and milk needs a super high turnover. But a jewelry store selling expensive diamonds, it's naturally going to have a very low turnover. The number itself doesn't tell you if the business is good or bad. What it does is reveal the kind of business model it's running. All right, theory is great, but let's see how this actually works in the real world. We're going to take that idea of inventory turnover and apply it to a few real companies. You'll see just how much these numbers can tell you. So check this out. This is where it all clicks. We've got 4 different kinds of retailers here, and just look at the massive difference in their inventory turnover ratios. On one end, you have a grocer like D-Mart, turning over its entire inventory more than 14 times a year. And on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have Titan, the jeweler, at a slow and steady 1.6. So what's going on here? Well, it confirms exactly what we were just talking about. D-Mart's high number is exactly what you'd expect from a business that sells everyday stuff that people buy all the time. Titan's low number is also perfectly normal for a company that sells expensive luxury items that you only buy once in a while. It just proves that context is everything. A low turnover for a grocery store would be a huge red flag, but for a jeweler, it's just business as usual. And for an investor, the real magic happens when you track this number over time to see if it's getting better or worse. So now we can pull all of this together into one simple, elegant framework that you can take with you and apply to literally any sector you want to understand. It's a really simple 2-step process. Step 1, you start with the big picture. You look at those external supply and demand forces that are affecting every single company in the industry. And then step 2, you zoom in. You use those key metrics like revenue per square foot and inventory turnover to compare the individual companies and see who's really winning the game. From the big picture down to the small details. That's the framework. And that really brings us to the end. But the analysis doesn't stop here, of course. The real learning begins when you take this framework and apply it yourself. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. For the industry that you're most interested in, what are the key supply and demand forces that are shaping its future right at this very moment? Thanks for tuning in.